of fans in Fort Worth cheering them on against TCU, but the Red Raiders could not get out of their own way and dropped a game against the Horned Frogs. We'll talk about what this means for their tournament hopes as well as what Texas Tech needs to improve on coming up on today's Locked On Texas Tech.
Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Texas Tech, a member of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, which we are streaming live on right now. So be sure that you go and subscribe to our YouTube channel so you do not miss another stream like this one. I'm Ryan Mainville. I cover Texas Tech for the Dallas Morning News, and I'm joined by Emery Lida, a longtime Texas Tech analyst, writer, and podcaster. Today, it's a special Saturday episode. I wish we had a little bit more of a joyful mood to enter into this episode with, but Texas Tech just put up a hard-to-watch game, and we've got to break down what happened. Today's episode is brought to you by runyourpool.com. Be sure that you get your March Madness bracket set up there. Emery, tough game today.
Yeah, I wish we didn't have to come back onto this after a loss, and unfortunately, it wasn't one that I think a lot of people saw coming after the first half. Tech ended with a strong run to close out the half, ended up with an on-arm slam to make it an 8-point game, 41-33 coming into half. And then in the second half, it just kind of went south. It wasn't like one of those like outright clear as day collapses where TCU went on some like 20-0 run to make it flip the game around, but it was rather just they just kind of kept chipping into the lead. And I think Tech, to me, the offense is really what sort of started the downfall. The defense, obviously, people are going to point to the end of the game where TCU had several possessions in a row where they were able to get into the lane at will. But really, to me, offensively, you just started having a lot of unnecessary turnovers. I think Tech was very focused on kind of making sure that they were kind of bleeding out every possession, getting quality looks, and it just seemed very unnatural after the first few minutes. And that's really the difference in the game. The raw numbers offensively, if you ignore the turnovers, look really good. You're talking about a team shot 58% from the field. You shot over 65% from the two-pointers, had 17 assists in this game on only 25 makes, which means that as a whole, you're talking about 68% of your baskets came off an assist. So usually you'd be looking at those stats in a favorable view, but all of the turnovers that came with them and all of just the kind of sloppy offensive possessions, I think kind of came as a result of trying to be too diligent, just sort of took them out of rhythm. And over time, TCU was able to overcome it. Obviously you had Mike Miles having a tremendous game, but certainly, Tech's offense made it to where it was a completely avoidable demise, and it wasn't one of those things where you could point to any one thing. It was just in general the team sort of got out of rhythm, and you're going to lose games in the Big 12 when you have that happen. TCU is still a good team. They still have a lot of athleticism on the perimeter they can take advantage of, and at the end of the day, that was what the difference was. You just weren't in rhythm, and TCU was able to take advantage on their home court.
This is going to sound critical, but I think it's a little warranted. This is probably the first time this season, maybe the second, considering the second half against Kansas State, that I felt like Texas Tech just got out-schemed. In the second half, TCU was taking away exactly what the Red Raiders wanted to do on offense, and Texas Tech just did not adjust. They just continued to run the offense that they were trying to get. They were trying to get the ball in the low post, then that wasn't working. So then they tried to get the ball to the mid post, and that wasn't working. So then you had Bryson Williams coming out to the three-point line to try and get a touch. That wasn't really leading to anything. And it just kind of felt like Texas Tech just stuck it out, and they were trying to just work through the issues and wait for things to click. But I don't know about that, man. It really felt like today Texas Tech was in a place where they kind of needed to show their hand and try something else, but despite the lack of results, it just didn't happen. And again, like you mentioned, you look at the raw numbers in this game, and it does not look like a game that, Texas Tech just got flat out outplayed in. I mean, you shot a higher percentage from the field than TCU. They made just one more three-pointer than you, just two more free throws. You out-rebounded them. You were plus 10 in the paint. This is not a game that Texas Tech lost due to, hustle, which is nonsense. Nobody should be saying that anyways. It's not a game that Texas Tech lost due to officiating. It's not a game that Texas Tech lost to variance because these numbers are so close. It just kind of feels like Texas Tech was in a place where they needed to change their scheme, and they just didn't. And maybe that's a little critical of me, but that's what I'm thinking immediately after watching this game.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know exactly what I'm going to say about Bryson Williams being used pretty extensively in the post. I think that to a degree it works out, and obviously he's a really talented post scorer. But at the end of the day, teams have been able to scheme around that, and they've been finding ways to really sort of limit his passing issues. Which objectively, like, he's a decent passer, but he's not someone that you can really rely on to make like full blown facilitator based offense out of the lower mid post. And so when you're forcing the action to him in the post and teams are kind of prepared for that, it's just simply not going to work. And I mean, I'll give credit to Williams. He is a really good scorer, and I think he can score in a number of different ways. And for a while there, I think Tech was able to kind of mask some of the issues just because Bryson Williams had a couple of really nice straight line drives there in the second half that kind of shielded off some momentum. But at the end of the day, when you just have a guy that is so reliant on post scoring, and that seemingly was all Techs wanted to look for him in the second half. Like, they ran quite a bit of short roll and pick and roll action in the first half. In the second half, I mean, I don't know if it was kind of the difference in facilitators. TJ Shannon played less through the mid part of the second half than he did through most of the first half. And obviously, you didn't see as much on-ball minutes for Kevin McCullough or Malik Wilson or Clarence Nadoli in the second half. But it was just a really strange sort of offensive development. And it's something we've seen. You mentioned the Kansas State game. I think that was kind of the first time we saw of it. Outside of maybe against Gonzaga, we saw a little bit of it as well, where guys, once the offense wasn't in rhythm, you just saw a lot of post-up actions, whether it be with Williams or Arms or even O'Banner. And then we got to Kansas State, same sort of deal. You had a lot of success with Bryson Williams, but when they started forcing that away, it kind of seemed like the offense just completely sputtered. And then for me, this was not as bad as the Oklahoma game. I'll put that the away game against Oklahoma. I think that was one where Oklahoma had such an aggressive strategy that you probably should have changed out of that offense way earlier than you did. But this one, I mean, I don't think it was anything like some resounding statement about how Tech's not going to be able to come back from it. But it's a little bit concerning because it seems to be a trend on the road. Even in games where you've won, you've had these 6 to 8 minute spurts offensively where you're just not able to get anything going offensively. We saw it against Texas. I mean, the mid part of the first half was really ugly in that game. You saw it against Baylor in the win. The first 10-ish minutes of the game could not get anything going offensively. And then obviously all of the losses you've had on the road have kind of had that combined output where it's like every game there's something going wrong. And you look at the overall numbers for this team on the road and offensively, I mean, they drop almost 20 points from an efficiency standpoint on the road compared to at home. And that's one of the three largest splits in the nation. Like, you're talking about a team that shoots over 10% worse from three. Per 100 possessions, you're scoring 16 points less per 100. Like, there's not a lot going for you. So it's been frustrating to see, and it's something that I think you're gonna have to work on coming into March.
I've got a couple more thoughts on Texas Tech's scheme in this game, but I'll get into that in our next segment after a quick word from our sponsors. March Madness is only 3 weeks away. That means you need to start thinking now about where you're going to be running your brackets this year. Are you going for the usual, or are you looking for the best? We've done our homework here, and we're running brackets with runyourpool.com. Along with standard brackets, Run Your Pool offers games like Survivor or Pick X. Both are really fun in their own ways. They have options to edit scoring, and they offer more intel to make your picks. All stuff you're not going to find at ESPN or CBS. Clearly, we believe Run Your Pool because, like I said, we're running our brackets there ourselves. There's no truer test than that. If you want to play against us for a shot at a cash prize, join us at runyourpool.com/lockedon. And while you're there, create your own pool for your friends and family. Enter Pure Madness at checkout for $10 off your custom pool. All the rules and details will be available there. That's runyourpool.com/lockedon for your chance to win a cash prize. We look forward to seeing and beating you there. Thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Talking Texas Tech's loss to TCU, obviously one that the Red Raiders will look to improve on and move on from. But I mentioned the scheme in the first segment of our show, and I think that I just still don't really understand the lack of adjustments in the second half for Texas Tech in this game. But it would be an oversight for me to not mention the turnovers in this game. 20 turnovers from Texas Tech. That's the most that the Red Raiders have had against a team not named Baylor in 2 years. So clearly a very, very outlier game in terms of what Texas Tech has developed on the offensive end over the past few years. But and I think a lot of those, you mentioned Kansas State in that first segment, and that's kind of a game that I want to keep coming back to over the course of this recap, because I feel like that game, I mean, we mentioned it in our recap of that episode. We were like, hey, Kansas State just put on film how you beat Texas Tech, or at least giving you your best shot to do so. And that's switch everything, create the mismatch inside to where Texas Tech thinks they have an advantage, and then do everything you can to not allow that entry pass to get there. And that's why Texas Tech had 20 turnovers today. Like, plain and simple. It was not like their guards were just fumbling the ball at the top of the key every possession. They were forcing it inside, and they could not find a look that they liked. But it just never stopped. Like, they kept feeding the post and kept trying to feed the post until they got a look. And I don't know, man. I feel like you could have saved yourself at least a handful of possessions here and there. And I didn't like the last shot. You mentioned to me that TJ was likely anticipating being fouled. That's a good catch. That's something that I did not consider. But, man, I don't know. I just feel like Texas Tech is in need of an adjustment. But, I mean, what do you do whenever an opposing team is taking away the perimeter and you can't get the ball inside? Like, even in the first half, TCU was on a bit of a run. Texas Tech tried to get the ball to Bryson Williams, and they turned it over. The next possession, they got the ball to Bryson Williams, and he scored. And you're thinking, okay, it's a good way to ice the run. But then they keep trying that, and it doesn't work. And so I don't know. I just need to see something else from Texas Tech's offense.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to point out and say this, not just Bryson Williams. Obviously, Bryson's the main culprit because he's the primary option offensively. But we also saw in this game that TCU was switching on to Marcus Santos Silva. Same
Banner, they had a possession against Banner where they forced a turnover.
Yeah, so you had that matchup a number of times, and I think TCU, my count was of the 20 turnovers, I would estimate at least 7 were off of either stealing the post entry pass, or picking the pocket, or forcing kind of either a travel or something of that nature once the ball got into the post. So it was obvious that they were kind of willing to let Tech have that advantage on the mismatch. But I mean, I'm not sure what is sort of causing the insistence to go down low, because I think there are other ways to exploit the mismatches that we've seen. Like, when you have a possession in the first half where you have, I believe it was Devon Warren on Eddie Lampkin, like, those are also matchups you're going to get by them switching, right? And if Warren's able to drive that and kind of move the defense around, then suddenly that changes everything. And you can still utilize the size advantage that Williams has, but just not in a defined post matchup setting. And so for me, I think that there's just got to be more moving parts than just simply throw it down low to the bigger guy and let him score, because teams are willing to do that. And Tech's done it for years now against other teams. The 2018 team made a living off of putting Zaire Smith or Justin Gray at the 5 and daring teams to throw it down low so they could rotate or jump the pass or get a steal. And I mean, it's sort of a taste of your own medicine in a sense. And I mean, this is why I kind of like the small ball lineups in the first place, just because you don't have to deal with that sort of stuff. But that's another rant I could go on another day. But one last thing I kind of want to mention, since you mentioned it earlier, was the TJ shot. I actually thought that it wasn't a good shot. I don't want to sound like I'm like defending TJ in the shot selection there, but I do think that he had a clear thought process that TCU was going to foul him. And I think that we've seen that play out on tape before, that teams foul up 3 with roughly 5-ish seconds left. And so he thought that he had to get it up before he got to that point to be able to get the shot off. And Was it a reckless shot? Yeah, but I also think that you weren't going to get a look that was that much better than that. It would have been difficult to have gone away from the foul, made the first, missed the second, tipped it out, gone through the process. So it's just one of those things that like I can I can say it wasn't a perfectly aware play from him, but it's something that like it's understandable, and I think this is far from the worst decision that was made in this game from Tech players.
End of game situations are always really, really tough, and Texas Tech
Especially
really
down
should.
three.
Yeah.
Down, down three is literally the worst time to be a coach or a player in college basketball because there's like
Yep.
nothing you can do that seems right.
Yep. I'm sure a lot of Texas Tech fans are very, very familiar with that and just the absolute dread that comes with being down three. But truly, Texas Tech could have avoided that, and I think they should have, just given their second half performance. It was pretty rough. Any individuals you want to talk about in terms of Texas Tech? I mean, Bryson Williams was really, really good whenever he was able to get the ball and looked for his shot. He just put the ball in the basket today, man. 8 of 9 from the field. Did have those 3 turnovers, obviously, but I think that he was just being asked to be somebody who he's not. And I think that scheme, and I'm not trying to like hammer this point home. I think Texas Tech will be fine, but I do think that that's something to watch, and just getting him back into spots where he can be successful, I think will be really, really big. One other thing that I was just thinking of, this isn't like a groundbreaking claim for basketball. I mean, this is how the game works, but Texas Tech's best offense this season has come off dribble drive, and that's what Barrett Peary just ran like an absolute madman at Portland State. I mean, you go back and you watch the teams that he coached, every single possession they're taking the ball inside. Obviously, it's difficult to do against an athletic TCU team. TCU's defense is good. They're top 30 in KenPom. I mean, they're not Texas Tech good, but they're a lengthy, good defensive team. I think the best shots that Texas Tech created in this game were off the dribble drive, especially from Devon Warren. He had a dump off pass to Bryson Williams that I thought was really nice. And I think that's kind of the positioning that you've got to get Williams back into, is into a place where you're not always having to create through him, but you're creating because of him, and he's creating space for other guys. That's just a thought from me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think that especially when teams are going to switch like that and you're going to have advantages out on the perimeter that you can attack mismatches. I think that that's where you can find probably the most efficient offense because like I said, the post ups on if you look at it from a one possession standpoint, if you have one possession left in the game, sure, like it could be the most efficient possession if you're looking at just a make or a miss. But the amount of time that teams spend scheming on that and kind of putting you in situations where you don't want to be with post ups makes it to where it's kind of a really questionable decision. And especially when you have bigs that while they have experience as passers, they're not guys that you would consider to be high level passers, right? Like Bryson Williams has struggled throughout his career to some degree as a ball handler and as a facilitator. It's not something that he's horrible at, but it's probably not a strength of his. Same thing with Marcus Santos Silva. And I just think that you're going to have to kind of work on that offense. And certainly the guard situation is something that also plays into that. I thought we saw a lot more of Devon Warren as a primary ball handler in this game compared to what we've seen the last few games. And in contrast, kind of less of Kevin McCullough, even though he kind of, again, was on a little bit of a minutes limit. When he was out there, it wasn't as much as a primary facilitator, and he kind of got more in an off-ball role. And I'm interested to see how that plays out because I felt like Warren as a ball handler, kind of his decision making can be a bit off at times, and he's a little bit loose with the dribble. But at the same time, his ability to get to the rim, I mean, if you're talking any other player on this team, the only guy I would probably consider better than him in that sense is TJ. And with TJ comes with kind of a little bit more recklessness in a sense. So, I mean, it's something to pay attention to because I definitely think if you have guys like Warren and TJ getting to the rim, that can open up a lot for the offense. And I mean, both of those guys are natural scorers. They can get to the lane. They can finish well. They can finish efficiently, finish through contact. So it's just something to look out for. I don't think this offense is dead in the waters as by any means. I mean, we've seen at home, they've been electric the last few games, but it's just weird that all of this seems to happen on the road. And especially it's sort of the same sort of style. Even the Oklahoma game, it was a different sort of strategy. Oklahoma brought more pressure through digs, but as a general rule, the same concept of really kind of making aggressive moves toward the post and kind of getting the ball and forcing turnovers from that sense. That's something that has followed Tech regardless of who they've been playing on the road.
Even when plenty of your own fans are in the arena, even when this is just a bus trip, it's really interesting to witness just how Texas Tech has met some hiccups on the road this season. I want to talk about seeding because I know that that's in everyone's mind right now. But first, a word from BetOnline. Football might be over for this season, but basketball is in full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Emery. Everybody was talking this past week about what Texas Tech can do to secure a position on the 2 line. Maybe they can even string a couple of games together and get to the 1 line. And just like that, you looked a little too far ahead, and now you've got a road loss. What does this do to Texas Tech seeding? I'm just gonna show my hand here. Essentially, I'm gonna let you drive this conversation because there are a few things I care less about than seeding before March. Really, and I know that you just have a better understanding on this than I do, and so I'm gonna let you explain your take. I saw you talking a little bit about it on Twitter, and I know that you've got some good stuff in your back pocket.
Yeah, so here's the thing on seeding, right? If you look at comparative resumes from the last 10, 11 years in the tournament, not a single team that had Tech's resume coming into this game had finished lower than a 2 seed. And that takes into account Q1 wins, that takes into account some of the efficiency ratings. Basically, you're talking about it would be unprecedented for Tech coming into today to have landed on the 3 line. And I get that last week, the NCAA selection committee, when they had their top 16 teams, released Tech as, I believe it was number 10 overall as a 3 seed. But since then, almost every team around them has lost. I mean, you're talking about just going down the order. You had Kentucky losing today. You had obviously Auburn, Purdue. Baylor's in a rough spot against Kansas right now, and they've obviously got the head-to-head loss twice against Tech. Villanova lost. Duke is the one team that really hasn't lost. UCLA lost. Providence has lost to Villanova in the last couple of weeks. Like, all of these teams have lost. And TCU, if you're looking at the Q1 resume, it's a Q1 loss. It still is. It's borderline Q1A if they get into the top 38 in net, which I think they're right on the line for. So there's a lot more losses out there that are worse and more damaging than Tech's loss to TCU. And you look at the resume that they already have, and they still have a bunch of Q1 wins. So for me, this loss to TCU really does nothing more than kind of erase one of your Q1 wins, which you could say, sure, like the game against Texas. And that was, sure, it was a real emotional win, but that gives you kind of the buffer to be able to lose this sort of game. And if you look at the team cast on Bartrovic, which I've mentioned a couple of times in the last week, is something that I think it's not a perfect metric because I think there are some sort of faults in it, but certainly it doesn't have Tech as a team that's going to be at risk of falling to the 4 line, as some Tech fans are saying. And I even think it shows that if you win out in the regular season, you're going to be comfortably on the 2 line because every other team around you has lost in the last couple of weeks outside of Duke, and Duke only has 1 or 2 more opportunities for a Q1 win the rest of the year. So you can overcome that loss to TCU because at the end of the day, you're still going to have another Q1 opportunity against Oklahoma State and whatever happens in the Big 12 tournament. So for me, this loss really, it takes away a little bit of the buffer that I think you had. But like we predicted 3 games ago that over the last 5 games, Tech would go 4-1. Both of us did. It's still completely possible. And at that time, that was still a line that would have gotten you right onto the edge of the 2 seed line. And the way that things have gone down, you've still had teams around you that have been losing. And so it's sort of just reset the situation. And we'll see. I think the TCU game here wasn't the end of the world. I think if you win the next 2 games, you're going to come into the conference tournament with all to play for. You win all 3 games, you're still easily going to be a 2 seed. You can probably even lose in the semifinal and still end up on the 2 line. That's just how I view it, but we'll see.
We should trademark they don't want you to know what a quad one loss is, man. That should be we should throw that on a t-shirt, man. Sounds like a great idea.
How many teams don't have a Q1 loss? How many teams have how many teams have 0 Q1 losses and more Q1 wins than Tech? Nobody does.
That's right.
My
Rob and
record
Kyle,
is.
we're picking up on your marketing strategy, guys. You guys are doing good work, and we're stealing your trademark for quad one losses. All right, Emery. 2 games left. Got K-State at home, Oklahoma State and Stillwater. What do you want to see from Texas Tech in these final 2 games before postseason comes?
Better offense, 100 points per game. I want to see Devon Warren dropping 40. But no, I think in general, it's the offense is what I'm really curious to look out for, because in the last 2 games, on one hand, you got Kansas State, who seemingly solved the riddle the first time that you played them, and Nigel Pack's coming off an absolutely incredible game in a loss to Iowa State. You're going to get him on Monday night, and how they defend against Pack, and then how they are able to perform offensively against a K-State team that gave you fits last time. That's going to be really important to see. And then on Saturday against Oklahoma State, you're going back on the road in environments that you've struggled with this year, and it's a place that you haven't won since 2019. So you're going to get their best shot. You're going to get a team that's good defensively, and you're going to have to see if you can find ways to score in a more efficient manner than you did today. So for me, I just think it's looking at how the offense develops. I'm hopeful we can see some more development in terms of not playing as much through the post, and certainly hopefully clean up some of the turnover issues. But I think it's all going to come down to the offensive end. I'm confident the defense, sure, Mike Miles had a really good game today, and I think that we have gone the entire podcast without mentioning that. But his ability to have 26 points, I think he had 4 or 5 assists and 5 steals. Offensively, his ability to get to the end of the paint really opened up what TCU could do offensively in the second half. And even if his scoring was sort of more first half dominant, I think his overall impact on the playmaking side was so important in the second half. And then defensively, he had some really nice instinctive plays. So just all around really good performance from Mike Miles. And I think that you're going to have another test against Nigel Pack on Monday against a similar caliber player. So outside of that, though, I feel confident in Tech's defense, and I feel like it's offensively that you're going to have to see how they develop over the next couple of games.
Yeah, Miles had 4 points that he should have worked a lot harder for. But I mean, just a really impressive performance from him tonight. A guy that gets to the rim with ease and just puts points on the board. He's a big time player. I think my final adjustment, I'm with you, is figure out a way to create consistent offense outside of Bryson Williams. You've just got to find a guy that you can trust to go get you a bucket at points in a game, whether that be Devon Warren, Terrence Shannon Jr., Kevin McCullough, Adonis Arms. I don't know. I think that's kind of the beauty of Texas Tech's offense for the most part of this season is anybody can step up and get you a basket. But I think it's also a problem whenever you don't know who that other guy is and nothing is working for you offensively. So I think just adjusting and finding somebody that can put the ball in the basket for you will be big. We've got a question in the live chat from Will Komar. He asks, what does that mean for TCU in the top 25? We'll close with our answers to this. Well, Will, this is a big win for TCU. It probably solidifies their conversation in the tournament, unless they just completely melt down over the rest of the course of the season. But I think this game pretty much solidifies them as a 10-11 seed, maybe. We'll see what happens over the course of their season. And then, man, I couldn't even throw a dart and get close to what the top 25 is going to look like on Monday. I mean, today has been absolute madness in college basketball, and there's going to be a lot of shuffling.
I think they're going to receive votes, but I'd still have them probably anywhere from 3 to 8 spots away from the top 25. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of chaos going on, and I haven't really sat down and thought about exactly where they're going to fit in. But certainly, I don't think that the top 20 this week, you're not going to be able to surpass them just with a win over Tech at home. But the bigger thing for TCU is this definitely guarantees them a spot in the tournament. I mean, it would take an almighty collapse and some questionable decisions from the committee for them to not make it in, because now, I mean, they've now got a signature win, and really throughout conference play, they've established themselves anywhere as either the 5th or the 6th best team in the Big 12. They picked up, at this point, 5 different Q1 wins now. So Their resume is good. They're going to end up anywhere for me from a 9 to an 11 seed, and you can work with that. I think this is a good year for Jamie Dixon. They were considered to be a bottom 3 team in the Big 12 coming into the season, and to be able to sort of wrap it up and get a big win over Tech and really show throughout conference play that they're ready to play in the midfield of the Big 12, that's something they can be proud of, and I think that it builds momentum going forward for them.
You think Tech is still top 10 on Monday?
I think they dropped probably 11 or so.
Yeah, I'd probably have them at like 12 right now. At least a couple of spots to drop. That just happens whenever you lose a game. I mean, it has been madness this weekend in college basketball, and Texas Tech will certainly be hoping for the cards to continue to fall into their favor. But as we continue to say, the Red Raiders control their own destiny, and they'll have another chance to do that against Kansas State on Monday. We will be back on Monday to preview that game, give you our keys to the game of how Texas Tech can avoid back-to-back losses. Until then, you can keep up with us on Twitter. You can follow me at rmainvillelbk. You can follow Emery at eraser41, and you can follow the official Locked On Texas Tech Twitter page at Locked On TCU. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel if you have not already. Thank you to Will, Wade, and yes, even you, Locked On Longhorns, for joining us today for our live show. Be sure to turn on our notifications so you do not miss us whenever we go live in the future. Thanks for making Locked On Texas Tech your first listen every day. Now make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. Thanks for joining us this weekend, and we